it is something that, in a sense, I would say we are all aware of. It's this famous example of, if I tell you, don't think of a red elephant, what are you going to think of? A red elephant. You're going to see this red elephant in your brain, or you're going to think of it in some capacity. So why is it that we think of a red elephant when someone says, don't think of a red elephant? It is because our brain, when it mentally exercises it. Hi everyone, this is Danai, and in today's video, I want to focus on what I find is a very important component of mental practice or any mental exercise that you will do. It could also be mental exercises away from the piano that are not connected to piano practice, but any mental thinking you do is connected to this aspect that I want to talk about today. It is something that I learned quite early on and that I found really important and really helpful to know and to implement. So if you're interested in hearing what I'm talking about, then keep on watching. First of all, as you can see, I am not at home. I am in Paris right now. I'm actually in quite a cool artsy hotel. As you can see, there is an old phone there, and there is a sign above the dresser that says applause, and there are many little gimmicks and funny things in the hotel that I've enjoyed a lot. But now let's get into the video. So I have talked in the past about the huge power that mental practice has. I've also mentioned pianists that famously practiced mentally a lot. And I know that there are people that can learn an entire piano piece simply by practicing it mentally, and there are many strategies that go into that. But today I want to focus on mental practice and mental exercises in a broader sense, because we do mental exercises and practice, if you want to call it that, subconsciously in our brain all the time. Every thought that we have influences what we do. Even little thoughts influence our everyday life and our piano practice or practice on any instrument. So for example, when you wake up and you start having thoughts, these thoughts will influence your day, whether they are positive thoughts or negative thoughts. You could call that a mental practice as well, whether you are affirming yourself with your mental thoughts or whether you are putting yourself down. This will influence the way you feel, the way you act, and the way that your day goes. So I think I have mentioned that in a video, something I like to do. This is, by the way, not the strategy that I want to get to, but just as a little pre-story, something I like to do when I wake up is I like to write down 3 things that I'm thankful for, and I like to write down 3 things that would make today great. So that way I kind of have a positive start to the day, because I know that my thoughts are very powerful and that they influence my day a lot, and I start on a positive note by being happy, by being grateful for what I have, and by focusing on what I actually want to achieve to make today successful. And compared to that, if I woke up and the first thing on my mind would be worries, stress, I would be in a different mindset. But that is just to paint the general picture of how powerful our thoughts are and how strongly they influence us. When I was studying, I had this amazing music physiology professor. I think I've mentioned him in a couple of videos. Whenever I talk about hand or brain related things, he really was an expert in that field. Many musicians from around the world go to see him when they have any physiological problem. And he really talked a lot about hands and what to do against injury and all of that. But he also talked a lot about the brain, and he did many studies. He conducted many studies in which he hooked musicians up to monitors and saw what's happening in their brains, did brain scans, and found out a lot of interesting things. So he actually talked to the students, and I was there, about this fact. And it is something that, in a sense, I would say we are all aware of. It's this famous example of, if I tell you, don't think of a red elephant, what are you going to think of? A red elephant. You're going to see this red elephant in your brain, or you're going to think of it in some capacity. So why is it that we think of a red elephant when someone says, don't think of a red elephant? It is because our brain, when it mentally exercises itself, when it visualizes things, and when we mentally practice, it doesn't register a negation. So this is really the base of what I want to talk about today. If you say to yourself, don't do that, What the brain registers to some capacity is just the thing that you're not supposed to do, but it just registers the thing. So if you say, don't think of a red elephant, it only registers red elephant and it visualizes the red elephant, and then you have it. So now if we implement that into our life, for example, if you practice and you say to yourself, don't play that note, then the brain will register and start focusing on that note. So if that's a wrong note, the brain will start actually concentrating on that wrong note as opposed to not playing it. So it is very important how you phrase things in your brain and how you concentrate on them. So the perspective from which you approach your thoughts is important, and the perspective from which you approach your mental practice is important. To stay with the example of the red elephant, if you don't want to think of a red elephant, then you should tell your brain to think about something else. So let's say, think of a green elephant, and then you're going to think of a green elephant, or think of a green bird, and then you think of a green bird. So the don't is not something that your brain registers. And when we are on stage, the music physiology professor really emphasized to us, only concentrate on what you actually want to happen. So thoughts like, don't rush, don't play that wrong note, don't let it go wrong, don't do this wrong posture. All these thoughts are not helpful. Although the intention behind them is great, and although you are trying to mentally get into that state and to focus, it is not as effective as you telling yourself, play that right note, play a bit slower instead of don't rush, feel the music instead of don't mess up this technically hard passage, play the correct fingering, play the third finger instead of, oh, don't use the second finger. So the whole don't do that is not as effective as do the right thing. And this might seem like such a minor thing because it basically has the same content, but it's just a different way of phrasing it. But I assure you, it is so powerful, and I have seen the difference that it makes and the changes that it makes if you approach it from that side. And the reason is as simple as the negation doesn't register in our brain as powerfully as the thing that we are talking about. So this can really be transferred into any category of life. When you do your, if you do that, as I mentioned when I wake up, when you do your positive thoughts or what would make today great, I never say what would make today great would be to not, do that, to not, let's say, procrastinate too much. I always say it in a positive way. So what would make today great would be to achieve this and this goal. So I always try to think of what I actually want and not what I don't want. And same goes for little things. So if you wake up and say, I hope that I don't mess up this phone call. Let's say you have an important phone call. I hope that I don't mess up this phone call today. Don't think that. Think, I hope or I wish that this phone call will be successful. So it is it gives you a bit more confidence. It gives you the positive perspective, the positive approach. And it is more likely that your brain will register it in an effective way and in a way that it can actually make it happen, as opposed to the negation, which the brain can't really deal with. We can deal with it on an intellectual level, but not when we are trying to visualize something, and that's actually what mental practice is all about. Visualizing, manifesting our thoughts and what we think about, then we need to formulate it in a positive way. So try to keep that in mind whenever you implement any mental strategy. As I said, it can seem like such a minor, unimportant detail, but it actually is very helpful. And to me, really the foundation of a lot of progress that I made on that front of mental practice, mental implementation of my thoughts and my wishes. And as I said, visualizing goals that you have. Always put a positive spin on it. Focus on what you want and not on what you don't want. Even if you're just saying what you don't want to get what you want, put that all aside. Don't mention what you don't want. That's unimportant. What you want in your life and in your practice and in your brain in order to achieve your goals is solely what you actually want and what you actually need, what you want to focus on. That's what you should fill your brain up with positive sentences that will lead you to your goal. So next time you're on stage and are stressed, try to remember focusing on what you want to happen, not what you don't want to happen. If you are practicing, if you are doing a mental exercise, then try to not focus on the mistake that you want to avoid, but on the actual correct way you want this to go. And in the beginning, this is actually not that easy because those thoughts creep into your brain a lot and it takes some practice to master that. I remember when I heard this in my studies, it's not that I was successful in implementing it right away, because of course I still had the thought of, oh, don't make that mistake, don't do that. But I tried to reprogram my brain in really stopping those thoughts, or if they came, immediately changing them. So as I said, instead of don't play that note, immediately I started really concentrating on saying play that correct note, or don't use that fingering, use that right fingering, and all of that. And this is also why my main tip when people ask me how to deal with nerves or stage fright or things that can go wrong is I always say, fill your head up with all the things that you want the music to be. So if you are playing a happy movement that is fun and uplifting, then fill your brain with the character of that movement, fill your brain with how the phrasing is supposed to go, with the colors, with this happy feeling. Focus on every little detail of the musical phrase and don't focus on all the things that can potentially go wrong. So that advice that I give is actually also based on this fact of don't focus on the potential mistake that can happen, but focus on what you want to transmit and convey to the audience musically. And if you focus on all that, then the mistake and the negative thoughts that lead to the mistake won't even have room in your brain. And I just want to leave you with one last thought. It's something that I have mentioned in the past as well, but it is important to this video, I think. And it is that when we make a mistake on stage, even if it is little and it seems like a random mistake that happened by coincidence, our brain registers it before it happens. And again, this is a study that was conducted by that same professor that taught us this important mental strategy. And he hooked up musicians' brains to a monitor while they were playing. And if a little mistake happened, as I said, that seems random, like a finger slipping away, he actually could measure that the mistake registered in the brain before. And it could be in the form of a thought like, ooh, what if a mistake happened? Or, oh, make sure to not play that wrong note, or things like that. The mistake actually registered in the brain, and there was an order from the brain to the fingers to, let's say, make that mistake. This all happens in split seconds, and it is so subconscious that we don't register it. But I find it incredibly helpful to know these things and to have this information, because that means what I was saying in this entire video, that if you focus on the things that you want to happen, on the positive things, then you will avoid these types of mistakes. So this is what I have to say about that. I really hope that you found this helpful and that I could explain what I mean. I didn't find it that easy to find the right words to explain this strategy, but I really hope that you understood my point and that you find it helpful and that you can implement it in your piano practice or other instrument that you practice, or just generally in life, because I really find that this is something that applies to all of our life. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you knew about this already or if you are already implementing this in your life. Leave a comment down below. I will be very curious to read your comments. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like and subscribe to my channel. That would help me a lot. And I will see you again in my next video next week. Bye.